Did you ever have to go through something so scary that even thinking about it gives you goosebumps? Maybe an earthquake or a car crash, something that left you feeling vulnerable, hopeless, and afraid. And then, after the dust settled and everyone was okay, you thought, I can't believe I went through that. How did I get through that? Well, a long time ago in a faraway land, there was a chick who found herself in exactly that situation. The chick had just hatched out of her egg and everything was dark. She tried to peep, but she couldn't see anything. Peep, peep, she cried, but no one answered. She could hear the other chicks peeping back and forth from somewhere, but they were all huddled together and none of them could see anything. So they were scared. They didn't know what was going on. It was only when the farmer came in to feed them that they learned the truth. The farmer looked around. What happened? He asked. Why is it so dark? Then he saw a sack lying nearby with a small hole chewed into it. The farmer knew immediately what had happened. There had been a mouse living in the wall, and every night it had come out to steal eggs. One of the eggs hadn't been fully formed yet, but the mouse had taken a bite out of it anyway. And now that same mouse had somehow managed to crawl inside the incubator and eat a few more eggs while the rest of the chicks had hatched out and were still stuck inside. The farmer sighed. There was nothing he could do. He couldn't risk letting that mouse live in his barn. It would probably bring snakes or rats or God knows what else. So he decided to play one last trick. He grabbed the empty sack and put the chicks inside. He made sure the hole in the sack was big enough for them to escape from, but not big enough for the mouse to crawl through. Then he tied up the sack and set it down in front of the hen house. When the chicks heard him leave, they stopped peeping and waited until they heard the sound of squeaking coming from the sack. Then they started pecking and scratching at it. And when the first chick finally managed to break free, the others followed quickly. One by one, they all scurried back into the safety of the hen house, and the one who had hatched out first couldn't help but feel proud of herself. She had been so scared, but she had been strong and brave, and now she was safe. She looked around at the others. They were all chirping happily, taking their first little pecks at the food and water the farmer had put down for them. The whole world was full of new sights, sounds, and smells, and they spent the day exploring everything. But as the sun began to set, the darkness returned. This time, it wasn't as scary for the chicks because they knew what to expect. They huddled close together and waited for the night to pass. They peeped for their mother, but she didn't answer. The hen had seen what happened to her babies, and she was too afraid to come anywhere near them. All she could do was watch over them from afar. The chicks snuggled close to each other for comfort, but it didn't take long before they fell silent. The darkness was so complete that it felt like the whole world had turned off its lights to watch them struggle. There were scary shadows everywhere, and the wind outside the hen house sounded like a hungry wolf ready to pounce. The chicks trembled, but they also felt a new kind of excitement. They didn't know what lay ahead of them, but they knew they were about to find out. After what seemed like hours, the first rays of sunlight peeked through the cracks in the walls, and suddenly the chicks could see again. They rushed to the windows and looked outside. The farmer had come back. He let them out of the hen house and gave them more food and water. And as the day wore on, more and more baby chicks hatched out of their eggs. Soon there were dozens of them running around in the yard, and they all belonged to the same brood. The chicks played until sunset, but that night they were much less afraid of the darkness. Now that they weren't alone, they huddled close to each other for warmth and comfort. And although the night was long, it wasn't as scary as the first one. As the days passed, the chicks grew bigger and stronger, and although they were still a little afraid of the dark, they knew they were never truly alone. They had each other, and that made all the difference. One night, however, the wind outside was especially loud, and the chicks couldn't help but cower in fear. Suddenly, a huge clap of thunder shook the ground, and the rain started pouring in through the cracks in the walls. The chicks huddled close to each other, but some of them were still trembling. The biggest and bravest of the bunch, a strong hen named Gertrude, walked up to the window and peered out. She couldn't see much in the darkness, but she could hear the rain and wind screaming. She clucked softly to let the others know that everything was fine and they should try to sleep. But just then, another loud crash echoed through the hen house, and one of the chicks cried out in fear. It was a tiny chick, smaller than the others and very shy. His name was Thomas, and he had hatched out later than everyone else. He had always struggled to keep up with the group, and now he was scared he would be left behind. The other chicks had already started to fall asleep, but Thomas couldn't. He watched the cracks in the walls anxiously, waiting for the next crash of thunder. He felt so helpless. What if he got hurt? What if he lost his sight forever? He couldn't bear the thought of being alone in the darkness without anyone to protect him. Suddenly, he felt a soft nudge on his shoulder. Startled, he turned around to see Gertrude looking at him with concern in her eyes. She clucked softly and walked up to him, nuzzling him with her beak. She didn't say anything, but her eyes told him everything. She was telling him that everything was going to be all right. Taking a deep breath, Thomas closed his eyes and leaned against Gertrude. He still couldn't see, but he knew he wasn't alone. Gertrude stayed with him all night, and by the next morning, the storm had passed. When the sun rose and the clouds cleared away, Thomas could finally see again. And when he looked around, he realized something. All of the chicks were gone. He called out to them, but they didn't answer. And then he heard a familiar voice calling his name. "Thomas, come here. Little one, we've been looking for you." It was Gertrude. She and the other chicks had gone to find food, and they were worried when they couldn't find him. "I'm sorry I didn't come with you," Thomas said, ashamed. "I was so scared last night. I thought I might go blind." "It's all right," Gertrude said, nuzzling him. "We all get scared sometimes, but we're here now, and that's what matters." And Thomas knew she was right. From that day on, Thomas wasn't afraid of the darkness anymore. He had faced his fears and realized that he was never really alone. Whenever he felt scared, he just had to remember that his friends were always there for him, and that gave him the strength to keep going.